Well, there's only one name you need to know about today, or maybe there's more than one. But it's back again, Maria, this time in Typhoon form, but we've also got Beryl as well. Welcome to Force 13's live event, and we're going to be talking about it and discussing it with you live. It's just past 9 PM UTC over in the United States. On the East Coast, it's just gone 5 o'clock in the evening, and over in the Far East in Asia, where we'll be watching Maria as well. Over in Japan, I believe, well, it's getting on for the early hours of the morning there, indeed the daylight hours. And we'll be looking at some imagery of that shortly. But what you're looking at on your screen right now is a late in the day image of Beryl, which has developed quite substantially throughout today, from a humble invest at the start of today's proceedings with a high chance of development to what is now a medium tropical storm, I suppose. And what's more is that the National Hurricane Center, if you haven't heard the news yet, are predicting that Beryl will become the first hurricane of this year's hurricane season in the Atlantic. They're expecting that on Saturday morning, or maybe even Friday night, depending on how things go. At the moment it's at 10.3 north, 42.8 degrees west. It's in the central Atlantic, quite a low latitude, heading towards the west-northwest. And it could be heading towards the Lesser Antilles, although at the minute the National Hurricane Center believe that it will dissipate before it gets there. On all sides of the screen we've got nice little indicators. Hopefully they'll be useful to someone who might be watching, maybe not wanting to listen to us so much. I know a lot of people do take a look, and not so much the audio but the visual. But anyway, in this hour I'm joined by David, if he's still with me.
I'm still here.
Oh, there he is. Joining us from the east coast of Australia, where the temperature is actually cooler than it is here, or was earlier today. But there we are. Beryl has formed today, and were you expecting to see this, David?
No, I wasn't, especially the Beryl. I've been following another forecaster, and apparently that African dust cloud, apparently it was stretching right across the region, and Nathan, that the NHC has it only surviving till at least Monday, so I really haven't focused on this southern system. And I also note another one closer to America.
We'll get onto that a little bit later on.
Yep, I haven't checked that one. But Beryl, what do we know? Tropical storm.
What we do know is that Beryl is tiny. The National Hurricane Center said so themselves. It's got the 34 knot winds, that's tropical storm force, extend out only 30 nautical miles northeast and northwest, which is very small. I'm not quite sure how that relates to other small storms of the past. I mean, what comes first to mind when we see Beryl in its current position is Danny, for those of us who were watching in 2015. It is pretty much in line with that at the moment. But the National Hurricane Center predict that it will become a hurricane early on Saturday morning. I don't suppose you could load us the National Hurricane Center's track map there in the rush to get online. I haven't acquired that
there
yet.
It is. I should have it on the screen.
Yeah, and as you can see on it, it's not a full cone, because the National Hurricane Center anticipates that Beryl will weaken very quickly within that 24-hour period between Sunday and Monday from a tropical storm to nothing. So it's going to be one of those that we do quite often see, and we saw more than one of them in the 2015 season. A system in the central Atlantic that doesn't quite make it to the islands, but may trigger tropical storm warnings down the line, depending on just how much of a chance that it's got. Percentage chances at the moment, according to the National Hurricane Center, their percentages are a little bit different to ours, only getting up to about 12% last time I saw, in terms of tropical storm wind probabilities, and that's in Barbados. All the other locations, according to the NHC, are below 10%. That is the wind probs there in graphical form. You see quite clearly what is expected of the storm. Quite, well, I was going to say quite easy to predict, but I suppose it isn't, because Beryl is such a small storm. It is more prone to intensity fluctuations, in which we could see significant intensification. It could go beyond the peak that they're expecting at minimal category 1, and we know that Danny did, and already at the moment it's looking like it's looking decent in its structure, even though it is very small indeed. Its cloud coverage is probably less than 150 miles north to south, and the wind field, as noted by the National Hurricane Center, is much less. If you could go back onto the wider onto the National Hurricane Center homepage there, David, you'll see also to their main homepage, you'll be able to see the other invest as well, which is in that yellow X. 30% chance there in the next 48 hours, 40% chance in the next 5 days. What do you think about that one? Have you been monitoring it?
Not really.
They did have a higher percentage chance earlier, I believe, but they did fall slightly. Quite curious from the ATCF that it's the minimum central pressure in this invest is 1021, so it's hardly a low pressure system at all right now. We'll get some imagery of that shortly, but for now let me present to you just the last 3 or 4 hours of the Ghost 16 imagery of Beryl, and everyone will exclaim that there's an eye there. It's not really an eye, it's just a little indentation. No significant signs of an eye wall, a full eye wall yet, but it could occur later on, and I think, you know, when Danny developed its eye wall, it was very much a surprise. It just appeared out of nowhere in that small blob of convection. It had a bit different Beryl because its convection doesn't appear to be as high, as intense as Danny's yet. It looks fairly somewhat tame. And there's David showing the infrared imagery there from RAM as well. And if you're familiar with RAM imagery, you'll this kind of imagery is always at the same resolution. It's the same scale in all of their imagery that they've done, and you'll realize how small it is when you compare that with other storms in the past.
Nathan, Beryl, what intensity are we going with?
Right now?
Well, in a day or two.
Well, yeah. Currently 50 miles an hour. And the National Hurricane Center are expecting gradual intensification up to 75 miles an hour by maybe Friday night, but Saturday morning. Whilst we're on the air, of course, we will take any questions that you've got as well. Start your message with Force 13 all in text in the chat section. I'm not sure if I missed any at the very beginning. Let me just see if I can go and find some now. Just a lot of opinions, I suppose, on what's going on at the moment. And I think I covered most of that, apart from what we will discuss shortly. Just briefly, here's a look at the Invest 96L, and I don't think anyone's going to be very pleased with it. It looks shocking. So that's that. I guess we'll move on. Whilst I go and get some imagery for Maria, which we'll showcase shortly, David's got the models up, which is very helpful to me because I didn't have any ready. So
Yeah.
You've helped me out there.
And this is the early cycle tracker guidance. Oh no, it's well, actually 18 UTC.
No, that is current, yes.
That's current. Because see, my time zone over here, what is it, 7:10 a.m. on Friday, but you can actually see the various models, the scales on the right hand side of the screen, and I'm just picking.
Do take caution, because a lot of those models shown are statistical models and have no bearing on the current atmospheric conditions. You can just about make out some of the other ones though. The OFCI is of course the official forecast from the National Hurricane Center. That's the black line there, which is just a little bit of a northerly outlier actually, which is interesting. You might be able to see HMNI, which I believe is the HMON, I'm not sure, or one of those.
HMON, yeah.
And then you've got the HWR.
It'll be the middle one,
which I believe is the it's either the purple one or the maroon one there that ends just south of Jamaica. But in all of these cases, I don't suppose you've got the intensity model there, but I would expect to see that on the intensity forecast that most of those models have dissipation by the time it gets over there. Nope, a little bit further down, near the bottom.
Near the bottom. Oh, here we are.
So you can see here, there's actually not much support amongst those particular models about hurricane status. But bear in mind that Beryl is so small, the models will have difficulty picking up the potential it has to develop substantially in a short amount of time. And there you can see the HWRF not really buying it. HMON, a little bit, to 60 miles an hour. But yeah, models, intensity, maybe not so much to look at those right now. We'll come back to Beryl, no doubt, later on, but I think everyone wants to see how Maria's doing. And, well, take a look at this. This is the latest image of Maria right now as it moves northwestward from the northern Mariana Islands. And I must say, it's getting that look about it. Are you looking at this, David?
I'm looking on the stream.
The Joint Typhoon Warning Center issued their forecast not long ago. I don't suppose you could get that up for us, David, whilst I talk about this. They are now predicting a Category 5 peak, and I think that Category 5 intensity will come much sooner than they're anticipating, and I think it's going to happen very soon indeed, looking at the rate of intensification that we've seen here so far.
We have it located near 15.5 degrees north, 142.3 degrees east.
Could you get the graphic up for us?
Maximum sustained. Okay. Looks like. There we are. There's the track chart.
Now you can see, for those watching over there, there is a very large cone. Joint Typhoon Warning Center does usually put out an extremely bloated cone, but irregardless of that, it is a fairly low confidence situation at the minute. It could strike feasibly anywhere from northern Taiwan to Kyushu in Japan on any points between, and it could still be pushing Category 5 intensity by the time it approaches those islands. This could be a serious situation. For the time being, it's going to be enjoying those empty waters of the West Pacific. Thankfully, Guam, I suppose, got off fairly lightly with it being a developing tropical storm as it was moving through there. But you look at it now, and it's significantly intensifying. I'm just going to get a loop up shortly of how it has been progressing in recent images. Let me just see if I can get this here. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it. This is RAM, sort of half caught on the screen there. You're looking at a period of time that encompasses about only 3 hours there. 3 hours of imagery on how Maria has been developing from the RAM imagery. And you look at that right now, I would say given that appearance, give that appearance another 2 or 3 hours, and that will be a Cat 5. I certainly believe that it's a moderate Category 4 at this point, but the official, well, ATCF and JTWC aren't exactly official in this part of the world. They're going with 125 miles per hour. They're playing catch up quite clearly. JMA, I don't know what they have at the minute. Let me just go and check that quickly. I assume that they'll have something even less. They're probably playing even more of a catch up. Oh, it's on the screen there. That's the latest JMA page. And they're saying, there you go, 70 knots, 10 minutes sustained. So they're only saying a storm of Category 2 intensity, which is clearly nonsense. So Maria on the cusp, I would say, of Category 5 status as we enter the daylight hours in the Western Pacific. And who knows where it goes from there, but that is one to watch very closely indeed. And warnings will likely go into effect some time from now, because it is very far away from its next point of land. You know, you look at that forecast there, it's looking to be 4, maybe 5 days away. There's a close-up image of Maria this morning as dawn breaks. So those are the 2 stories that we're covering on our live event this evening, or this morning, wherever you are around the world. It is an international service. Evening here at Force 13 HQ, afternoon entering the evening over in the States, and on the far eastern side of our globe, it's entering the morning. But you can clearly see the pinhole eye of Maria, which has been a feature for some hours.
Nathan, the Joint Typhoon Warning Centre has the eye 9 nautical miles irregular eye with spiral banding. The current intensity assessed at 110 knots, which is at the high end of the VORAC estimates. They're indicating T6.5 to T7. 127 to 140 knots.
Yep.
And that information will be updated in their next advisory. And I think they're still doing 6-hourly advisories.
Yes, of course, and that's their protocol. They won't. The Joint Typhoon Warning Centre never go, not in my knowledge at least, beyond that, sooner than 6-hourly updates, unless they do position updates, which they sometimes do on the 3-hourly basis. Here's some rapid scan imagery of Maria in the last hour or so, how it's been developing, the eyes swirling around there, and it's really getting ahead by the looks of things. And that northern eye wall there looks to be consolidating, or at least attempting to. And the eye has been trying to fill out. It actually looked a bit better earlier than it does now, the eye, just a little bit, but I think the eye will come back there. Certainly expanding.
And what did the JTWC say in their advisory? It's to what, peak 175?
I'm not aware of that. Last I knew, the Joint Typhoon Warning Centre are predicting a peak of 160 miles an hour. I think they'll have to. I think they'll have to revise that upwards, because I think we'll be looking at 160 miles an hour. It probably will happen in the next 2 hours. As I say, if it keeps up this appearance for another hour or two, you're looking at a Category 5 on the spot right now. So we'll obviously be watching that very closely. But its forecast is still, you know, somewhat unknown. Alright, let me see. Oh, I've just got a few questions here. Will Beryl hit America? Now, Depends how you define America. If you mean the United States, it's very unlikely. At all, to be honest. No, I don't think so. Let's see what else. Jamaica. Ricardo says, I'm living in Jamaica. Should I be worried about the storm? Beryl is the one that's being referred to. Probably not. We did see on the models that David presented earlier that the remnants of Beryl may reach the Jamaica area, the neighbourhood, but I don't believe that it's going to be an issue. I don't even think it will provide substantial amounts of rain. But we'll see. Any chances of Beryl reforming in the Gulf? Some models had it entering there. Now that is something I think is too long range to be thinking about at the minute. That is a good 10 days away, I should think. It certainly happened before in July. That's something to watch out for, but at the minute I wouldn't be so sure about that. Certainly if it did, it probably wouldn't gain much more strength. Just looking for some more right now. There was why is this name still used, referring to Maria, I'm sure. Now, that's a question you might want to put, because Maria appears to be a bad luck charm. And will Beryl be retired? Well, steady on, it's only just formed. Now back to you, David.
Just looking at some models, and they're really not lending support to Beryl forming. Looking at the Navy's Def Jam.
That's probably.
I've got that on the screen.
It's probably because they're struggling to pick the storm up.
True.
It's so small, you know, it's... I'm not sure how much we should be looking into all of this.
UK Met. We'll just have a look at UK Met. It's just an example, because I looked at it yesterday. There's the UK Met, and
that's out of date. Is it? No, it isn't.
Yes. No.
Well, no, that's a late model. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, a bit of a northerly take on that. And you'll note the sea surface temperatures around Beryl as well. Only marginal, 26 degrees, may even fall down a little bit. So you may see something like maybe a TD4 last year or something similar. There could be some, you know, it could blow into thin air unexpectedly. But the National Hurricane Center are running with it. I do wonder what their critique is. I haven't had a proper look at it yet. Let me just take a look at what their reasoning is and what they said, actually. I mean, this is very interesting. They have a lot of uncertainty in the estimate, according to the National Hurricane Center. By the way, here's some infrared imagery. See if you can spot Beryl. It is a very tiny storm off out into the open Atlantic. They say if the initial intensity is uncertain, the future intensity is even more of a quandary. Despite being surrounded by abundant dry air, Beryl has apparently been able to isolate itself and possibly moisten the near-storm environment while located in an area of low shear. Since the shear is expected to remain quite low for the next 36 hours or so, and small cyclones like Beryl often have a tendency to strengthen quickly over a short period of time, continued intensification appears likely for the next day or so. So that's really why they're going for the hurricane, and also because they are closely following the statistical model guidance, David. So it's going to be a big battle here between statistical models and the operational models in who gets to have the last laugh in the forecast there, because the statistical models are pointing towards hurricane status, and the models that we have, like the HMON and the HWRF, are going with a much weaker system, which you may be looking at there.
Yeah, I'm just bringing it up. So they have a 1008 And this is out to 126.
That's the HMON.
They don't have it developing, Nathan. They just have it a week low. Only
You're
down to about 1,000.
Well, you're not looking at winds there, though, are you?
No, I'm looking
clearly
at
a tropical
pressure.
cyclone for at least a short period there, you know. Take a look at the winds.
How do I...
If it has one.
So,
Oh, no.
no, that's pretty simple. I'm not sure, Nathan.
David's struggling. There's the wind.
I am struggling.
You found it. That's...
Found it. Right, here we go. So
mainly in the
the
north.
activity's going to be the northern.
Mainly in the north, the winds
northeast.
are concentrated. That's how it is right now as well. Alright, whilst you've been showing that, I've been looking up this imagery too. Oh, can't see all of it. Let's see if I can try and get a zoom out on that. Or maybe move my screen a little bit for this. This is from RAM, the diagnostics for Beryl. This is a very handy little graphic where you can see all kinds of different parameters. You can see what the intensity has there. Again, DSHP, LGEM, and the National Hurricane Centre's official forecast are the upper outliers there. Underneath it, you've got HMON, which is saying only 60 miles an hour at most. CTCX didn't even have it as a tropical storm. Well, that's been proved wrong already. You've got the HWRF, which had it barely as a tropical storm. So that's pretty much been proven wrong as well. Whether that will continue remains to be seen. Same for the GFS. Is there one other there as well that I've missed? I think that's all of them. And then you see there, you know, you've got the parameters on the right hand side. Now, most of those models think that the wind shear will go on the rise when the National Hurricane Centre think that Beryl's peaking. So that will be interesting to see whether it will manage to get to that Category 1 peak or not. SSTs will be dropping slightly in the near term, but then will be on a gradual rise. And relative humidity is currently okay, as the National Hurricane Centre insinuated from the sort of a dry air shield that's around Beryl right now. But it's going to be gradually on a downward trend, all pointing towards, mostly pointing towards dissipation by the time it gets to the islands. So if you're worrying in the Caribbean on the Greater Antilles, I wouldn't if I were you, because wind shear by the time we get to Sunday and definitely by Monday, which is when it's going to enter the Caribbean, wind shear will be going through the roof, and dry air will also be buffeting the storm as well. So in all likelihood, Beryl will die. Whether it will come back later, remains to be seen. Again, there's another image from GOES 16 over Beryl. And David showing us another view. Water vapor.
Water vapor.
This also illustrates quite well that shield, sort of a shield, or more you might want to call a buffer, that Beryl has got around it there from the dry air, which you can see in quite large amounts. In this image it's more represented by the lack of the lighter colours, which signify water vapour. So look west, there's a dry slot, 2 dry slots. Look north and northeast, there's significant dry slots there, and the Saharan air layer won't be kind up there either. Dust from the Sahara, which, you know, doesn't give storms a chance at all.
I'm just looking for the wind shear one. What have we got? That goes east.
Yep, very small, as you can see. You know, when you put it into the perspective there, it's a very small system. Could you show us the wind shear? Is wind shear on there? You'll have to go somewhere else to find the wind shear.
Yes, that's what I'm...
In the meantime, whilst you go and look for the wind shear, here's another late image of Maria. And you can see it's got quite an expansive field around it in terms of those clouds. And we are looking at a Category 5 in the making here. Typhoon Maria continuing where the hurricane of last year left off. Latest rapid scan on how it's progressing towards the northwest. Yes, that eye wall is consolidating. It did look a little bit as though whether it might have been losing it slightly, but no question about that. It is a consolidating eye wall in the northwest and west, and the eye probably has a little bit of clouds that it needs to clear out, but for the most part it is deep and warm, and that is a significant signal for Category 5 status.
Now, what was sea surface temperature for Beryl?
Sea surface temperatures on Beryl are marginal. I'm just wondering if there's any visible imagery of this same picture here. I'll go and look for it whilst David presents us the wind shear graphic for Beryl, and you can also show us Maria whilst you're at it. But first, Beryl, you can see it's a fairly low wind shear environment, but as you can see again, it will increase most likely when it gets closer to the Caribbean, and even if it does push that first band away near the Caribbean, well, look inside the Caribbean Sea. Wind shear is huge. It's a massive wall that will block any cyclone at the moment.
And we know that the tropical systems love the area in blue and green.
Yes,
a favourite line of mine.
Yes,
but as you said,
but to the northeast there, no matter how blue that wind shear is to the northeast of Beryl, the dry air from the Sahara will kill any storm there. Doesn't matter how low the wind shear is in that instance. But yes, you'll also see. Well, it isn't depicted on that chart, but somewhere, if you can find it at all, is the Invest 96L, which is marked by just a few pieces of clouds. It's really not doing very well at the minute. Wind shear is low to moderate for that one.
Yep. And wind shear, Nathan?
Yep. Can we go to the Western Pacific on this? So we can take a look at the latest with Maria's situation. And you can quite clearly make out Maria on that imagery. Actually a high wind shear environment as it approaches Japan. I wonder if that will remain the case. But it's certainly taking full advantage of the low wind shear pocket that it's got right now. And it makes you wonder when you look at that, whether that wind shear will prevail and it will be an early peaking storm, or whether it will push that wind shear aside and remain strong until it approaches those islands. It'll be very interesting to see what the authorities come out with on the next forecast.
Look. There's Maria. And I've got the 96L.
Oh no.
There it is. Yes.
There it is. Looks terrible.
Would it be that area there? Or would that be too close
It does appear to have rotation. You know, I don't even know what 96L is. It looks really shoddy, indeed.
No, it's
really shoddy. Latest on Maria, it looks like this. If you're late to the party, look what you've been missing. Well, it's intensifying rapidly. Luckily, it has pretty much spared Guam, certainly from this treatment, and the Northern Mariana Islands. Let's just go back and look at the latest visible true color image of Maria as well. That is there, the latest image. Where is it in relation to those islands? Looking just to the southeast. The islands are there somewhere. Okay, maybe not.
Nathan, the JMA has central pressure for Maria being 915 millibars.
That's quite possible, yes.
18 UTC on the 8th.
Oh, right, that's a forecast. No, it could well be 915 millibars now, or very soon. Oh, there we are, those outlines are finally loaded. And you can see where Maria is in relation to the Northern Mariana Islands. The southernmost island of that chain there is the US territory of Guam. Yes, 2 US territories have been threatened by 2 Marias in 2 years. And then you've got the rest of the Northern Mariana Islands. The island immediately to the north of Guam is Rota, I believe. And then you've got the islands of Tinian and Saipan. And then further north you've got several smaller islands. Most of them are uninhabited. If you're looking to the future, if we pan further north on this graphic, 2 very tiny islands up there towards the north of your screen, 3 actually. Those are the central island there is Iwo and further towards the northwest, if you go much further, the tiny Daito Islands of Japan, and then the Ryukyu Islands, Okinawa, which is the the main island near the bottom, and the Amami chain of islands to the north. Further to the west there you've got the Miyakojima, Ishigaki and the Ayama Islands, as well as several other smaller islands just as you get towards Taiwan. Further north up there you've got the rest of the Ryukyu Islands into Kyushu, which is where Prapirun threatened just a few days ago. And if you look far enough north in Japan, you might still see what's left of Prapirun somewhere. I don't know. We'll try and find out later. Back to David, showing the latest infrared on Maria. In fact, looks like you've got the whole life of Maria there. See if you can speed up
the whole life.
Speed up
yep,
that
we'll
animation.
Speed it up.
There. This is how Maria has evolved in the last 3 days.
Yes. And this is one of my favourites. Actually, you can see the eye, and keep in mind that the JTWC had it at 9 nautical miles. So, could we actually see the eye developing further?
Well, if it does, we're looking at more than 160 miles an hour.
And that's still a strong possibility of further development.
The way it's going at the minute, most definitely.
I'm just looking at the JTWC reasoning on the system.
There's a full-scale shot of Maria in the Western Pacific. And I'll leave that with you there, David, as I scoot back over to...
Yeah, I'll just bring up another satellite imagery. Yep. And I'm hoping the International Space Station might later today fly over Maria and sea surface temperature 29 to 30 Celsius. Ocean heat content values very high. Typhoon 10W, or Maria as we know, is currently located along the western periphery of a weak north-south oriented steering ridge with a strong east-west subtropical ridge entrenched to the north. It's forecast to continue tracking north-northwest to northwest over the next 48 hours.
Yes. Don't forget that Maria is still around 4 days away from affecting land areas wherever it ends up. And Beryl is still around 3 or 4 days away from doing that in the Atlantic as well, if indeed it ever gets to the Lesser Antilles as a tropical cyclone, which I'll have some more imagery for you in just a moment. In the meantime, let's see if we've got any further questions. You can send in your own questions for our consideration. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. Well, isn't that wonderful when a webcam doesn't work on a live stream? But there we are. Well, you know, I just like to be presentable. But in any case, start your message with Force 13 in the chat. It will light up big and bright for me, and I'll be able to, we'll hopefully be able to try and answer any queries that you have. Otherwise, what is the point of us being here? Did Typhoon Maria make landfall on Guam? As far as I can ascertain, no. I think it passed just to the north. I wasn't following hugely closely, admittedly, as much as I ought to have done. I think it did pass just to the north. Maria doesn't have to worry about wind shear. That's a comment there. Not for now. Could Maria potentially be comparable to Haiyan? No. Do you think 96L will form? The CMC says it will. That's another question. I don't think so, quite honestly. And there's another view from the JTWC. Okay, well, let's see.
Yeah, I'm just looking for something.
Here's the latest imagery of Beryl. You see it looks quite respectable in those images as the day comes to an end over the storm. But if you were to zoom out, you'll notice just how very small it is. Just letting the imagery catch up a little while here. But once it works properly, you'll see the whole scale of Beryl in relation to the Atlantic. Force 13's Facebook page came out earlier and likened it to a small fish in a big pond, David.
I'm just looking at the radar, the Caribbean, Green Cayman. You can see a little bit of activity to the southwest.
You can also see on the visible imagery from earlier today that low wind shear to the northeast, as I can demonstrate, won't help a storm at all, because look at all that. You can visibly see on the satellite Saharan dust making a trip from the Sahara Desert all the way across the Atlantic, and you can still see traces of it even in the Caribbean. You can just about see that.
So that dust won't help the system either.
Not in the long run, no. But I certainly understand why people are asking about 96L, given its proximity to the US, but there really is very little about it at the moment. No warnings in effect, in case you were wondering. Obviously we'd be telling you that quite often if there were any, for either storm, as a matter of fact. warnings will probably not be issued for a little while for Beryl, and for quite a bit longer for Maria. This live stream will probably run for just the hour, because we felt that since both storms are quite far away from land, regional updates were a little bit premature, and so we thought maybe it was best to do a live update on both of them together, which we hope we are bringing to you pretty well. So in the next 15 minutes we'll take as many questions as we can, as long as people have any. Do you see a little eye in Beryl, is a question. Well, near the start of the show I was discussing that. Not really an eye, not a bona fide eye, at least not yet. That was when it was first forming. Just trying to get a close-up on that for you, not being cooperative just at the moment. We'll try and get it to cooperate, even if we have to force it to. No, I don't know. Anyway, you saw the imagery before it completely broke on me, where Beryl was. Well, we'll leave you with this image for now. That's one of the latest views, and this is an updated view from GOES 16 as well on the infrared band there. Try and get a zoom in on that as much as possible, not in the best of quality, but you can see Beryl there. Not an eye yet. Obviously, you know, when convection is fairly light, and convection has been fairly light all day, it's not a huge amount of convection that you're seeing in the storm. You'd expect, you know, if it was really blowing up, you'd be seeing oranges and reds, but you're still looking at only greens there. So when convection is fairly weak, you are more likely to see quite clearly the circulation, and it can bring about a false representation of an eye. But no, not yet. But you never know, maybe tomorrow. But at the moment, Beryl is located there, pretty much exactly halfway between Africa and the Lesser Antilles. It's about 1,200 miles away from Barbados. So it's got some ground to cover. At the last National Hurricane Center update, the storm was moving at 16 miles per hour. So do some maths on that, and we'll see how long it takes to cover 1,200 miles. It may well speed up later on as well, so call it 20 miles an hour, and you would get the storm getting there in 60 hours. Did I do that right? If it averaged a speed of 20 miles an hour, it would get to Barbados in 60 hours, 2.5 days. Well, that might be a little bit optimistic. It should be a little bit longer than that. Looking elsewhere across the Atlantic, not much else going on. And to the Invest, which is somewhere there, and looks, in my opinion, still shocking. Which is why it's got a fairly low chance of development. David?
Now, just looking for other information that we haven't raised, but on the screen, Nathan, is a GFS wind model available on the windy.com website. This is out to a week, but if you, I'll just bring it up to the weekend. So this is on Maria. There are two models available on that website, the ECMWF and the GFS.
There's another late visible image on the storm as well. Really starting to look the part, I have to say. Well, you get the general idea of the path that the storm's expected to take on that graphic, moving off towards the northwest. That's pretty much in line with what the JTWC is saying, and eventually towards the islands. But I would take a lot of caution when looking at graphics like these, which sort of show you, you know, it's not exact. This is just one model's rendition. If you went and drew a crayon track for the storm, you know, you might have just as much of a chance of being exactly right as this model did. So I would dismiss for now that very close approach to Daito and a possible landfall on Okinawa. It's obviously possible, but it's not going to occur. Almost 100% chance it's not going to occur exactly as this model sees it. But I'll tell you what, if anything like that was to occur, that would be a serious situation. Look at it go, still up towards the northwest near China. I believe we've got some latest. There's a latest look inside Maria's eye, as best as we can see from the satellite there, and it actually is clearing out the eye itself there. So in those latest frames, it's looking very ominous indeed, and we're probably looking at a Category 5 imminently in the next hour. Let me just grab a temperature check inside that eye. It's got an eye temperature of 10 degrees Celsius. The maximum eye wall temperature is -77. The minimum eye wall temperature is -82. So that suggests to me 160 miles an hour. We're not calling it on this event tonight, but I think it's pretty much assured that you'll be seeing a Category 5 pop up in the Joint Typhoon Warning Centre's next forecast, unless something remarkable happens in the next 3 or 4 hours before their next update. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I do agree, and I'll be keeping a close eye on Maria, and I'll just check the JMA, see if there's any warnings.
No, there won't be any warnings yet.
Not yet.
More questions. Which one is more powerful, Hurricane Marcus or Hurricane Matthew? Now, I'll tell you what, that is actually a very good question. I would have to look at it all again. I couldn't give you an answer on the spot. My hunch would be Marcus, but I would have to go and look. I can't do that whilst I'm on the air right now, but that's something to think about.
We'll come back with an answer.
What do you think of the Northeast Pacific having the most active June on record? Well, take caution in how long these records go back. It's not a particularly large record in the Eastern Pacific. We've no idea what happened. Well, we do have some idea of what happened in other years. But I would suggest that, you know, maybe hugely active Junes. They can happen sometimes, but usually it is more placed towards July. So yes, it has been a very extraordinary June in the Eastern Pacific. A lot of them were fairly weak storms, however. And Daniel disappointed, didn't he?
Yes.
Most notably. Will Beryl become a Danny? We can't rule that out. Deciding on no at the minute. The National Hurricane Center admit themselves they may be erring on aggression in their forecast. It's not supported by HWRF, HMON, CTCX or the GFS, but they've already been proved wrong so far, as we discussed earlier. That's it so far. But that is the latest that we're looking at in Maria, and the imagery gets better and better. Look at that latest image. Look how it's changed in just 10 minutes in that imagery. And now the eye temperature on that latest image is up to 11. And there's more of it as well.
Oh,
Northwestern side may be looking a little bit bare, but I think it will sort that out. This is a Category 5. And I expect nothing less when the confirmation occurs. So, a question. What kind of intensity do we expect from Maria in the coming days? Very pertinent indeed. Well, I think from here on in... let me just get back to you on that. I think I have an idea, but I just want to take a look at something else to confirm. In the meantime, David's got a model run up.
Yes, this is for Maria. The information's available on the Tropical Tidbits website, and quite a bit of consensus on the track. 952 dropping to 945 as it approaches the, I think, the Chinese Hong Kong region.
Not Hong Kong,
and
no.
I have
Shanghai, and then towards
Shanghai. Yep. And I note a viewer's comment about warnings being issued for Shanghai. So Nathan, we're looking at what, 2 to 3 days before it reaches the coast.
A bit more than that.
Okay, so
probably
I
talking
would
4 days maybe, or maybe a little bit more. Depends on its movement at the minute. Movement's going to change. Let me get to this now. Just looking at another diagnostic plot here for Maria. Now, what we can garner from this, first of all, you look at the track forecast. There is actually decent agreement in the models for it to affect one of the Ryukyu Islands of Japan. HWRF takes a more northerly solution towards Korea. Very similar track to Prapi-Rune in a way, at least later on. I don't know, a bit further west. And the CTCX and GFS in very close alignment later on. Very close to Okinawa. JTWC actually a little bit to the south of that forecast. You can see the models haven't really picked up on its intensity. This can happen when we have a rapidly intensifying storm. What we can tell you from this graphic though is that the models predict that wind shear will reach a minimum point in the next 12 hours. And then it's going to rise sharply. Somewhat, but not. I wouldn't say it's a storm killer even if the CTCX scenario plays out, because it goes back down again later. But it looks like it will get into a little bit of turbulence when we get into Saturday. So it looks like we're going to get a first peak and maybe a second peak later on. So for this first peak, it will probably most likely be the most intense peak of the storm, and we could be looking, I would say, at least 175 miles per hour if the current situation plays out on the models there, with that wind shear reaching its low in about 6 hours and then gradually going up again. Plenty time for Maria to get to 175. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see whether it takes full advantage of that. SSTs, no problem at all. 29 degrees Celsius, actually going to be rising slowly as the storm moves towards the northwest. And the relative humidity is looking decent. So the only barrier to Maria is wind shear. That is quite worrying. If you're on the coast of Japan or China or Korea, there is very little to stop this storm over the next 5 days. Even if that CTCX high wind shear scenario plays out there, it drops again later on. So I'd say there's a very high chance of Maria being at least a category 3 by the time it reaches the Japanese islands, if not stronger, and I would say category 3 might be quite conservative. So this could be a very severe storm, probably the most severe in the area for some time, and it's probably going to be large by the time it gets there as well, because it's had several days of development and it already has started off fairly large, as you can see here. So Maria will probably be something that we'll be talking about for days on end as we go through it, I suppose. David?
I'll just bring up the floaters on Maria.
So
we're
this
looking
is a
at
more,
the rainbow.
yeah, this is a more long-term imagery spell that we're looking at here on Maria.
And you clearly see the eye. Let's zoom in a bit.
Yeah. So I think those on the Mariana Islands will be very thankful that Maria did this later on. Although they do have a history of storms doing that. Well, they don't always get lucky, Guam. But you remember Dolphin of 2015, that intensified rapidly just after the islands. Just one example I can think of close to hand. David, we're bang out of time. We're going to have to wrap up here. But it's been a very good event. There will be more, no doubt.
Yes.
Here from Force 13 HQ. As we will probably be in a long haul situation as we watch Maria later on in the week as we enter the weekend. It's going to be something to watch for some time, and we'll also be watching Beryl. Will it reach the Lesser Antilles before turning post-tropical? It's currently against the odds, but you always wonder whether you've seen it all before you have actually seen it all. And you never know what might happen with Beryl. It could become another Danny. It could become Category 3 again. National Hurricane Center predicting a Category 1 hurricane by early Saturday morning. Maria is probably a Category 5. Not confirmed. And we're not going to be pulling the trigger just yet. But I would say about an hour's time, if it looks the same, Maria will definitely be at Category 5 status. And it's certainly living up to the billing that it had from last year when it committed its very unfortunate and disastrous offences towards Puerto Rico and many of the other islands who also have scars from last year as well. But that's a bit of a tangent. It's been nice of you to join us. We will be back at some point. Stay tuned on our social platforms. We're on Facebook and Twitter. Search Force 13 all in text. You can send us a message on there. You can also contact our email address, contact@force13.com, if you have any media to share with us or any questions directly. You can also add Fool 13 on Discord at extension 9094, and you can also add Force 13 on Skype for Tropical Weather Chat at any time away from these live events. And of course, we'll probably have some video updates here on YouTube as well in the meantime. David, nice to speak to you again, and I'm sure we'll be back again soon.
Yes, I look forward to it. And Nathan, just quickly, if you've got any questions, you can post it on any of our future updates on this
no doubt
developing scene.
We do care about answering the questions. It's the best way
Yes.
to get the messages across. Anyway, that's all from us. Good night, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.